Welcome to the deep dive. Let's get straight to it. That whirlwind inside your head, the constant what ifs, the replays of conversations, the mental obstacle courses you run before anything even happens.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It really does. And if you're feeling drained, not just by the day, but like by your own thoughts, you're definitely in the right place today.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable how many people go through this relentless mental activity. But it can feel really isolating, like a solitary struggle.
That feeling, yeah, like your mind's just stuck on repeat, an endless loop.
Exactly.
And that is precisely what we're digging into today. We're looking at Anthony Abbin's material, How to Stop Overthinking Everything.
Right.
Now, the crucial thing, I think, right from the start is that this isn't about, like, shutting your brain off.
No, not at all. That's not really the goal, or even possible, maybe.
Right. It's more about learning to direct your thinking, to guide it in a healthier, more helpful way.
Precisely. Think of it less as, emptying your mind completely, which can feel impossible.
Yeah.
And more about guiding those thoughts towards clarity, towards peace.
Okay. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty simple. We're going deep into this material, pulling out the key insights. The goal is to help you understand what overthinking really is, but maybe more importantly, give you some actionable steps, things you can actually start doing to change that pattern.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, let's dive in. Chapter 1, What Overthinking Really Is. The author really cuts to the chase here. Says, it's not deep thinking, it's not wisdom, not discernment. So what is it then?
Yeah, the book nails it, I think, by defining overthinking as worry dressed up as responsibility.
But worry as responsibility. Let that sink in.
Right. Because that constant mental churn, it feels like you're being proactive, doesn't it?
Totally. Like you're preparing for anything, being responsible.
Yeah, exactly. But often it's really just anxiety in disguise. Your mind is just frantically searching for solid ground, for certainty, where, well, it rarely exists.
So it looks like careful planning.
But it's fear of the unknown, kind of masquerading as analysis.
Yeah, that really reframes it. Okay, and the book talks about this cycle of the spiral. Can you paint a picture of that? What does that look like?
It often starts really small, almost innocently. Just a little seed of doubt,
Like, should I have said that? Or something.
Exactly. Should I have said that differently? Or what if this goes wrong? And then, because our minds aren't always practiced in stillness, it just takes off.
Right.
You suddenly find yourself replaying past moments, predicting every single possible negative outcome, maybe even scripting imaginary arguments in your head.
Oh, yeah. Like your brain's producing its own disaster movie.
Totally. With multiple bad endings.
Yeah.
And as the author points out, this endless cycle just eats up so much time and energy.
And doesn't actually solve anything.
Yeah, right. It just erodes your sense of calm. It's like mental popcorn. One kernel of doubt pops, and suddenly the whole bag is going off with replays and what-ifs.
Leaving you feeling burnt out, not nourished.
Exactly. Burned out.
And it's not just about the wasted time, is it? The book mentions how it chips away at our trust in ourselves, even in others.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you're constantly questioning your own actions or maybe imagining the worst intentions from other people, it gets really hard to build or maintain genuine trust. And if you feel like you have to mentally micromanage every possibility, that naturally undermines any sense of, faith, any reliance on something bigger than yourself.
Which leads perfectly into this next idea, the illusion of control. This one really resonated with me.
Yeah.
That feeling, that if we just analyze something enough, we can somehow control the outcome, guarantee a specific result.
What's key there, I think, is realizing that this relentless chase for certainty through thinking, it's often driven by fear.
Not by a genuine desire for wisdom.
Right. Not usually. The book uses the powerful metaphor here, suggesting that inner peace, not endless mental debate, should be the umpire in our decisions.
The umpire. I like that.
Yeah. But overthinking creates so much noise, you just can't hear the umpire's call. It's like trying to steer a ship by constantly rearranging the deck chairs.
While ignoring the rudder.
Exactly. True control, or maybe guidance, comes from somewhere else.
Okay, so if it's not really about control, what are we looking for when we get caught in overthinking?
Well, the author digs into the deeper stuff here, the underlying longings. And it's quite insightful, actually.
Like what?
Often, it seems to boil down to wanting to avoid pain or shame, wanting to feel seen, understood, safe. that intense pressure we put on ourselves to make the right decision. It's often fueled by those deep desires.
Okay.
But the book draws this really sharp contrast between all that mental wrestling
Yeah.
and the actual necessity of moving, of taking steps, even when you don't have all the answers perfectly lined up.
So that's where faith comes in. Faith as surrender.
Exactly. It's like we're trying to think our way to safety. But maybe true safety, or clarity anyway, only emerges when we're willing to step out, even into uncertainty.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the book gives us this stark reminder of what overthinking actually costs us, what it steals.
It's a pretty sobering list, isn't it?
It really is. Sleep, for one.
Yeah.
Just the simple joy of being present in the moment.
Clear direction, the ability to just make a decision without agony.
Yeah. And maybe most profoundly, it creates distance. Distance between us and other people, between us and our own inner peace.
Even our sense of purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the author makes a really powerful point here, saying, essentially, you weren't created to live like this. And that journey back, that renewal, it starts by recognizing overthinking for what it is, which is a kind of bondage, a mental prison.
Wow. That's a vital first step then, just acknowledging that it's not just some quirky habit,
Right.
but something that actively holds you back from, well, a fuller life.
Exactly. Recognizing it is step one.
Okay, let's move into chapter 2 then. The invisible triggers: anxiety, perfectionism, and control. The book argues that overthinking isn't random, right? It's usually sparked by how we interpret things.
Our interpretations, not just the events themselves.
And it connects to these deeper fears.
Yeah.
And it introduces these 3 quiet masters.
Yeah, anxiety, perfectionism, and the need to control. And what's interesting is how they often operate sort of in the background, almost without us realizing.
Like hidden drivers.
Kind of. They're described as heart issues, really. Learned ways we've tried to protect ourselves that maybe got a bit twisted.
Okay, let's break them down. First, anxiety. The book calls it the engine of overthinking.
Yeah, the engine, constantly flooding our minds with what ifs and, worst case scenarios. An anxious mind is always scanning for danger, isn't it? Even when there's no real objective threat. The author really emphasizes its power, like this relentless force. It even points to that instruction, be anxious for nothing.
Which doesn't mean ignore problems.
No, not at all. The idea isn't that our concerns are invalid, but that the feeling of anxiety, that state, it actively steals our faith. It replaces trust with this inner turmoil.
Yeah.
The image used is anxiety as a weed in the garden of peace.
Oh, that's good. It just chokes everything else out.
Exactly. It smothers all the good things trying to grow.
Okay, and then there's perfectionism. I think this one hits home for a lot of us.
Definitely.
It's defined here as this belief that anything less than flawless is basically failure.
Right. Which leads to endless delays and, more overthinking as we try to eliminate every single possible imperfection before we act. And what's crucial about perfectionism, according to the book, is how it often hides behind seemingly noble language, like, I just want to do my best.
But underneath,
it's frequently rooted in shame. This deep feeling that your worth somehow depends on your performance, on getting it right.
which is exhausting.
Totally. But the book offers this really powerful counter. Your value comes from somewhere else entirely, not from flawless execution.
From grace.
Yes. Grace, it emphasizes, actually rests on the imperfect. You're not loved because you get it right.
Yeah.
You're loved because.
Yeah.
Well, because you are. Period.
That's a really freeing thought, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, and the third trigger, control. And this isn't about healthy leadership, the book says. It's about a fear of letting go.
Right. What's key to recognize here is that this need to control, which often manifests as overthinking every single detail,
Yeah.
it gives us this false sense of power, like an illusion that we can somehow prevent bad things just through sheer mental effort.
But the book says it actually isolates us.
It does. That drive for control separates us from, the spontaneity of life, from genuine peace, from real connection with people, and ultimately from trusting in anything beyond our own understanding. True guidance, the book suggests, often begins right where our need to micromanage everything ends.
So the big takeaway from this chapter seems to be shine a light on these hidden triggers. Anxiety, perfectionism, control.
Yeah, because exposing them can start to break that overthinking loop.
It's not that we're inherently broken.
No. It's more about recognizing the untruths we might be believing and then choosing to surrender to a deeper truth, letting peace reign instead.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Chapter 3. When the mind becomes an idol. Now, this is a really interesting, maybe provocative idea.
It is thought-provoking.
The suggestion that in our modern world, the mind itself, our intellect, our analysis, has become a kind of subtle idol.
That we prioritize thought and logic, sometimes even over intuition or, spiritual guidance.
Right. We value and celebrate intellectual achievements so much, don't we?
We do. And it can be easy, almost without noticing, to put our own reasoning on this pedestal above other ways of knowing.
So for many, what they think, what they can logically explain, that becomes the final authority.
Yeah, the ultimate decider.
And the book argues that overthinking seen through this lens isn't just a bad habit, it's actually a form of idolatry. Can you unpack that a little?
The core idea is that when we elevate our own thoughts, our own analyses, above what we might perceive as truth or divine guidance, we're essentially putting our faith in ourselves, in our own mental capacity, rather than in something bigger. The mind, which should be a valuable tool, starts to take charge. It whispers doubts, it creates delays, keeps us stuck spinning in those mental loops.
And the irony is,
as the book points out, is that real guidance often comes through a willingness to act, not through endless perfect contemplation. It's not about never using our understanding,
of course there are,
but about never leaning on it completely, never making it the absolute foundation.
It's like we're worshiping at the altar of mental certainty, waiting for absolute clarity before we dare to move.
That's a good way to put it. And the book calls this a modern form of idolatry. Just like people in the past might have turned to physical idols for safety or direction.
We turn to our own mind.
Exactly. For direction, safety, success.
Yeah.
But this constant mental striving, this labor, it isn't usually a sign of spiritual fruit. It's often a symptom of underlying distrust.
So overthinking becomes like a ritual.
Kind of. A mental ritual offered to this idol of control or intellect. But it never truly brings peace because, well, idols always demand more than they give.
The book then contrasts faith in the flesh versus faith in God. What's the distinction there?
Well, when the mind is the idol, our prayers can start to sound more like strategic planning sessions.
Yeah.
And our obedience becomes conditional. Like, okay, I'll do it if it makes perfect logical sense to me right now.
Which isn't really faith.
Not true faith, no.
No.
Faith often involves trusting even when things don't fully compute with our current understanding. The book contrasts this carnal mind, driven by self, ruled by logic, often laced with fear, with the spiritual mind, which prioritizes what's been revealed or intuitively sensed over just what we think.
It's like constantly checking the GPS, even when you actually know the way.
Great analogy, yeah. Relying solely on your own mental map, even when a clear path might be shown.
So how do we dethrone the mental idol, as the chapter puts it?
The key practice offered is surrender.
But not surrender of intelligence.
No, absolutely not. It's not about stopping thinking. It's about surrendering the mind's supremacy, a conscious submission of our thoughts to a higher wisdom, to truth.
Okay.
It's about reclaiming our minds from the tyranny of overthinking by choosing to trust more deeply. The goal isn't an empty mind, but a mind governed by peace, clarity, and inner strength. Letting that greater power be, as the book says, the thinker within.
Wow. That's a really significant shift in perspective on our own minds. Okay, let's move to chapter 4. The fear behind the thought. This chapter makes a very direct claim.
It does.
Overthinking is always rooted in fear, even when it's disguised as responsibility or caution.
That's a core insight of the book, yeah. Fear is presented as the engine, the underlying driver. Overthinking is just the smoke, the symptom.
So unless we deal with the fear,
we'll just keep chasing the mental fog.
Yeah.
I have to address the root.
And the book points out this fear isn't always like obvious panic. It can be subtle.
Exactly. It can show up as that persistent need to be absolutely sure before you do anything.
Or I just need a little more time to think about it.
Right. Or even sometimes excessive prayer that's actually driven more by doubt and wanting control than by genuine faith. The core issue, according to the book, is often that we're seeking personal safety above all else, maybe instead of seeking truth or guidance. It emphasizes that while a higher power promises peace,
it doesn't necessarily promise a life free from challenges or risk.
Precisely. We're told we have a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind, which is the opposite of that chaotic, fear-filled echo chamber that overthinking creates.
So the crucial question we need to ask ourselves is, fear of what?
Yes. The book really encourages digging deep. Identify the specific anxieties fueling the overthinking.
And naming the fear diminishes its power.
That's the idea. What is it really? Fear of making the wrong choice, fear of being judged, misunderstood, abandoned, failure, even sometimes fear of success.
Interesting.
Fear thrives in vagueness, in the shadows. But when you drag it into the light, articulate it, it starts to lose its grip.
The book also identifies this unholy trinity of the overthinker's inner monologue.
Right. What if, what then, and what will they say?
Oof, that sounds familiar. And it keeps people stuck, right? Trapped between hearing something and actually doing it.
Absolutely. That endless loop of hypothetical worries keeps us paralyzed. But the book offers this really liberating perspective.
Which is?
That even if the worst thing you imagine happens, there's still faithfulness. There's still grace available. Even if you're misunderstood, your obedience, your integrity still matters.
Yeah.
Even if you feel totally unready, grace can provide the capability.
So the fearful what if can become a faithful even if.
Exactly. That's the transformation when faith replaces fear as the driving force.
So faith isn't about eliminating fear.
Not necessarily eliminating the feeling, no, but confronting it. The book uses the phrase trembling obedience.
Trembling obedience. I like that. Acting despite the fear.
Mm-hmm. Moving forward, even when you don't feel completely brave. The antidote to overthinking, then, isn't just trying to silence the mind, but anchoring ourselves in a deeper truth.
The truth that we're already loved, seen, held, regardless of our decisions or mistakes.
Yes, that foundational security, trust, ultimately sets us free, whereas overthinking is always trying to protect, to build walls.
And the chapter ends with that provocative question.
Yeah. What if you finally stop living in fear and something goes wonderfully right?
That really flips the script, doesn't it? Okay, let's move on. Chapter 5. Overthinking versus discernment, learning the difference. This feels really important.
Crucial distinction.
Because I think many of us can easily mistake our endless analysis for, wisdom or discernment.
It's a very subtle trap, as the book points out, to think that all that mental churning is somehow spiritual or careful. But the chapter emphasizes not everything that feels spiritual is spiritual. And not every cautious thought is actual wisdom.
So discernment is different. How is it defined?
Discernment is presented as more of a gift. A spiritual sensitivity that helps you see beyond the surface, to sense truth, alignment with purpose.
Yeah.
It's described as a spiritual faculty, not purely mental.
Okay. And overthinking?
Overthinking is portrayed as a burden. It causes confusion, traps you in fear. Discernment brings clarity, aligns you with guidance.
Can you give some clear distinctions? How can we tell them apart in the moment?
Yeah, the book offers several contrasts. Like, overthinking drains your energy, right? While discernment tends to give you a sense of direction, maybe even energy.
Okay.
Overthinking keeps replaying things, hoping for a different emotional outcome. Discernment often hears guidance once and prompts movement.
What else?
Overthinking constantly seeks external validation, more confirmation. Discernment brings more of an inner clarity, a knowing. Overthinking is stuck in what if. Discernment responds more to what is, the present reality. Overthinking procrastinates, maybe disguising it as wisdom.
While real wisdom propels action.
Exactly. Overthinking feels heavy, pressured. Genuine guidance tends to lead with peace. And overthinking demands more and more evidence, while discernment often trusts the source, even with limited information.
Those are really helpful markers. The chapter also contrasts the spirit of truth with the spirit of fear. How does that connect?
Well, discernment, the book suggests, is often birthed in communion, in connection, while overthinking tends to thrive in isolation.
Right.
Discernment flows more readily in stillness, in quiet reflection. Overthinking often breeds into fear of silence, needing constant noise or mental activity.
So we need to ask ourselves, is this inner voice God's witness or just worry? Is this stillness or disguised fear?
Those are the core questions, yeah. Is it coming from a place of trust or a place of anxiety?
So how do we actually cultivate this discernment? How do we train our inner ear, as the book puts it?
It's less about intense mental effort, like trying to figure it all out, and more about nurturing that deeper connection. Relationship, not just research.
Through practices like
Things like prayer, intentional stillness, spending time with scripture or sacred texts, and just cultivating a yieldedness, a willingness to be guided. The book contrasts the overthinking mind's mantra, I must figure this out, with the discerning spirit's quiet posture. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.
That's a big shift.
It is.
Yeah.
True stillness isn't necessarily when all questions are answered perfectly, but when the heart bows in trust, even with unanswered questions. And discernment often speaks just once, with that confirming peace. That peace becomes the compass.
Okay, let's transition to chapter 6, The Mind of Christ, God's Design for Mental Clarity. This chapter really elevates the conversation to a spiritual level regarding our thoughts.
Yes, it introduces this powerful idea that the Christian life involves a renewed mind, even you could say a replaced mind, the potential to actually think like Christ.
Which isn't just a metaphor.
The book presents it as a spiritual reality we can step into. So overcoming overthinking isn't just about mental discipline alone. It requires this kind of divine upgrade, a connection to this higher way of thinking.
The book describes the mind of Christ as not crowded. What does that look like practically?
Well, think about Jesus' clarity, his intention, his peace, even amid chaos. The book suggests this came from knowing his guiding voice, not being swayed by every opinion, embracing silence, acting without needing constant validation.
And that clarity is available to us.
That's the proposition, through the indwelling spirit. It's about setting our minds on things above, which isn't escapism, but alignment. It prevents us from being totally controlled by earthly chaos.
The chapter also mentions the sound mind principle. What's that about? Is it just a quiet mind?
Not just quiet, but clear. The original Greek word implies self-control, sober judgment, disciplined thought. It's presented as both a gift to be received and something to be cultivated.
So we have a role, stewardship of our thoughts.
Exactly. Choosing what stays, what goes, what gets renewed. This mind of Christ acts like a filter, evaluating thoughts based on alignment with higher principles, truth, peace, love.
And how does taking thoughts captive fit in? That sounds quite active.
It is. It means consciously bringing every thought, those anxious projections, the people-pleasing scenarios, the self-doubt, into obedience to that higher truth. The mind is seen as holy ground, in a way. Uninvited thoughts, fearful thoughts, they need to answer to truth, to scripture, to that inner stillness.
And finally, the chapter stresses replacing, not just removing negative thoughts. Why is replacement so key?
Because the mind resists the vacuum. Simply trying to stop thinking anxious thoughts often doesn't work long-term. We need to actively fill that space. With truth, with what is good, right? Pure, lovely, admirable. Meditation on truth is crucial. We need to pursue beauty, drink from scripture or wisdom traditions, rehearse truth until it becomes instinct.
So it's a devotion to a higher reality.
Yes, surrendering our noisy thoughts and actively trading them for divine wisdom and peace.
That's a really holistic and empowering view. Okay, let's get practical with chapter 7. Tools to silence the spiral. This chapter offers concrete strategies.
Yeah, and it starts by framing the mind as this battleground of agreements, where repeated negative thoughts can start to feel like truth just through repetition.
So the strategy is about interrupting and replacing.
Exactly. Breaking those old agreements and making new ones based on truth.
Okay, tool number 1, the pause principle. How does that work?
Simple but powerful. Overthinking gains momentum, right? It spirals. The pause principle is about hitting the brakes before it takes off.
So just stop.
Basically, yes. When you feel it starting, that anxiety, that churn, just pause. Take a deep breath. Maybe connect physically, like put a hand on your heart. Affirm peace, even just silently. That tiny interruption can break the cycle's power. Wisdom is often found in that pause.
Okay, number 2, journal the spiral. Writing it down.
Those abstract, swirling thoughts lose some power when you drag them down onto paper. It helps you see them more objectively.
So you write out the worry loop.
Right. Not to dwell on it, but to expose it. Then you can question it. Is this really true? What's the fear here? How does this align with guidance or truth? It externalizes the internal chaos.
Third tool, speak to the thought, like talking back to your anxiety.
Exactly. Answer the overthinking directly, maybe with scripture, or just with a simple statement of truth. Like Jesus did with temptation in the wilderness. You decree truth over the noise. I have a sound mind. Or perfect love casts out fear. You don't argue with it, you countermand it.
Fourth, limit your inputs. This feels very relevant today.
Hugely. Overstimulation definitely fuels overthinking. A cluttered external world often leads to a cluttered internal world.
So less noise.
Less noise, more margin. Be intentional about limiting social media. Maybe take digital fasts sometimes. Curate what you consume. Choose inputs that lead towards peace and truth, not just more chaos. Replace noise with communion, with connection.
Fifth, practice stillness daily. Intentional quiet time.
Yes. Even just 10-15 minutes. No devices, no agenda. Just be still. Focus on your breath. Listen to the silence. It trains the mind to rest, to not need constant stimulation. It helps you hear that quieter voice beneath the noise.
Sixth, replace spiral time with purpose time. Starve the spiral.
Pretty much. Idle time, aimless time can be prime breeding ground for fear and worry. So engage in things that have meaning for you.
Like routines, creativity.
Exactly. Meaningful routines, creative outlets, worship, serving others, study, even intentional, restful activities. Fill the space where the spiral tries to grow with purpose.
And the final tool, pray aloud and often. Why aloud?
There's something powerful about verbalizing it. It acts as a transference of the burden,
Yeah.
casting your cares, letting your own soul hear the release. It makes it more concrete.
These are great practical tools. It reminds you that you're not powerless against the spiral.
Absolutely not. These are like muscles. You train them, and gradually, peace can become the new instinct.
Okay, moving towards the end. Chapter 8. Decisions without delay, learning to trust God, and move. This tackles that tricky point of indecision.
Yeah, where maybe you've prayed, you've thought, but you're still just stuck, not moving.
And the book suggests that sometimes more prayer or seeking more confirmation isn't what's needed.
Right. Sometimes movement is the need. Indecision, the book argues, can actually be a form of disobedience, just disguised as caution or wisdom. That unwillingness to step out can actually prevent further guidance.
It even says delayed obedience is still disobedience. That's quite strong.
It is strong, but the point is clear. Overthinking breeds delay, and sometimes that waiting just becomes a refusal to trust, a refusal to step out. The book points to biblical examples: Abraham, Peter, Mary, Paul.
They acted quickly.
They often responded immediately, based on a sure word, even without seeing the full picture, right? They didn't wait for every single detail to be laid out perfectly.
The chapter also talks about how overthinking makes small decisions heavy.
Oh, definitely. We assign this huge, disproportionate weight to choices, agonizing over things as if the entire future hinges on this one small step.
When most decisions are just directional.
Exactly. They set a direction, and the book emphasizes that grace can reroute. Guidance is presented more like a shepherd leading you.
Not like a rigid GPS with only one route.
Right. A shepherd who walks with you, guides you turn by turn. And often, movement precedes the next instruction. You have to take the first step to see where the second step should land.
And that leads to the idea, movement unlocks clarity. This feels counterintuitive sometimes.
It really does. The lie we often believe is, once I'm totally clear, then I'll move.
But the truth is...
The truth, according to this material, is often, once you move, you become clear. Faith is motion, often into uncertainty. Obedience, taking that step, can open doors that just sitting still and thinking won't.
Wow, okay. And the chapter wraps up by stressing, you can't trust and control at the same time.
That's the fundamental conflict, isn't it? Delaying action because of overthinking is essentially, vote for control, trying to manage the outcome yourself.
Instead of trusting.
Clarity comes through moving. Grace meets us when we stumble. Wisdom grows even in the missteps. And redirection happens for hearts that are surrendered, that are willing to move.
So it's about making peace with risk, being willing to obey without 100% certainty.
Yes. Understanding that the truly safest place is in alignment, in obedience, even if it feels scary. Prayerful, peace-led, submitted decisions warrant action. Movement itself can be a form of worship, an act of trust. It's time to turn analysis into action.
We've arrived at the final chapter, A Quiet Mind, A Bold Life. That title really sums up the goal, doesn't it?
It really does. It paints a picture of that sacred silence, the inner peace and confidence that emerges when overthinking finally stops dictating your life. That's the destination. Communion over control, peace over panic.
And the chapter affirms the listener, you, who's maybe recognized patterns named fears learned tools.
Right. You've started reclaiming that mental territory, and now it's time for living it out.
It highlights the power of inner stillness, not as weakness.
No, but as restrained power. True confidence, it suggests, comes from that quietness within, which itself comes from deep trust.
And it reminds us that your mind has a mission.
Yeah, it's not meant to be your tormentor. It's meant to serve your calling through clear thinking, deep love, courageous action. And that all starts when the spiral ends.
There's a really encouraging call here. Let this be the day.
Let this be the day your mind stops being an enemy. The day you take imperfect steps without waiting for perfect peace. The day you forgive yourself for time wasted in loops.
And just move forward with grace.
Exactly. Focus on showing up, listening inwardly, and being unafraid to move.
It ends with the final declaration for the listener to embrace.
Yes, a powerful set of affirmations. Things like, I have the mind of Christ. I reject fear and confusion. I surrender my thoughts. I walk in clarity. I make peaceful decisions. I move boldly. I live from stillness. I am free.
A quiet mind is the beginning of a bold life.
That's the essence. It opens the door to new seasons, new possibilities. Go forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear, isn't it? Overthinking is such a common struggle.
It really is. So many people wrestle with it.
But as we've explored today, drawing from Anthony Abbin's work, it's absolutely something you can navigate, something you can overcome.
And what's valuable here, I think, is that mix of, practical tools and deeper spiritual principles.
Right. It's not just surface level fixes.
No, it's about really transforming your relationship with your own mind and maybe with God or your higher power.
So for you listening, take a moment, reflect on what we've talked about. What were the key takeaways for you?
What really resonated? Maybe one tool or one principle that you feel you could start applying.
And here's a final thought for you to mull over. Now that you have these insights, what is one small, concrete step, just one that you can take today?
Yeah, today. To interrupt that cycle of overthinking.
And move towards that quieter mind, that bolder life we've been discussing.
And, if this deep dive has sparked more questions or maybe a desire to go even deeper.
Definitely revisit the source material or explore related resources.
Absolutely. Look into managing thought patterns, cultivating inner peace. This journey towards a quiet mind and a bold life, it's ongoing.
It's a process.
It's a process. And every single intentional step you take, no matter how small it feels.
It's a step in the right direction.
Exactly. It counts.